Hello, today I'll be doing a video on the card game NOIR. It is the BGG.CON 2013 Special Edition. I actually went to this BGG.CON back in 2013. Got this game, had completely forgot about it. It looks like it got some damage. I had a tornado hit my house in 2014. This thing must have got some damage. Anyway, it was in a corner or something I hadn't seen, but I found it and figured I'd get it out and play it. Even though this box looks like it took some damage, some water damage or something, the cards were sealed in plastic, so they were not damaged. Now I will say this is the BGG.CON 2013 Special Edition, which I think there was just the regular edition Noir, which is very similar to this. This, I think, just the faces and characters on the cards here are Board Game Geek staff members or something like that, whereas I think the regular edition just had, generic characters. And I think there have been other editions of this game come out. Anyway, just wanted to mention that I'm doing my how to play video on this edition. So let's get started. First thing you'll do is take the 25 evidence cards. They've all got this back on one side and then characters on the other side that say cleared. You'll shuffle those up and set them to one side. Next you'll take the 25 suspect cards, which have a character and name on one side, and on the opposite side it says robbed. So you'll shuffle those up, and then you'll make a 5x5 grid of each of these cards. So let me get that done. Once you have that done, you'll have 5 rows of 5 cards in each one, making up your 25 suspect cards. And they are all on the non-robbed side. Alright, one more thing I should mention is the rules say there's 4 possible games included in the box. The Thief versus Detective, which is the original starter game. Then there's Collector versus Sleuth, Master Thief versus Chief, and then Den of Thieves, which is for more than 2 players. I'm just going to be playing the original starter game, Thief versus Detective, so those are the rules I'll be going over here. There is a card you can give to the thief that shows the steps they take on their turn, and a card you can give to the detective that shows steps they take on their turn. The thief does take the first turn of the game. So in the first turn of the game, the thief draws a card from the evidence deck, and he looks at it, and that will be who he currently is. So he is currently this guy. You do not want to show that to the other player, because the detective is trying to find the thief, and you don't want him to know who you are. So he is currently going to be John. So if we look on our cards, we'll see John is down here. But anyway, he looks at that and then places it face down in his play area. And then on his first turn, other than determining his identity, the only action he can take on that turn is to steal. And when you're the thief and you're stealing, basically you choose one of the cards that is adjacent to you. So adjacent to John would be any of these right here. If you were Bradley, adjacent to Bradley would be any of these 8 cards around him. If he was whatever this old River, the only cards adjacent to him would be these. But anyway, we know he is John. And when you steal, you just point to a card adjacent to you and flip it over to the robbed side. So we know he's John. We probably don't want to pick one of these because that would make it too obvious who we were. But so we'll say maybe he picks Emil, flips him over, and robs him. So he's on his robbed side. Now, the detective hasn't chosen his identity yet, but on the thief's turn, whenever you're doing a steal action, if you rob the character that is the detective, in other words, you find who the detective is, then you win the game. That's one of the ways you can win the game. The other way is to rob 16 characters, suspects on the board. But of course, on the first turn, the thief's first turn of the game, the detective hasn't even chosen his identity yet, so there's no way he could win on the first turn of the game. But again, he must do on his first turn of the game, the only action he can do is to steal, which is to point to one of the characters adjacent to him and flip it over and rob it. We'll talk about the thief's other possible actions here in a minute, but that's going to end the thief's first turn. So the first thing, on the very first turn of the detective's turn, he has to draw 4 evidence cards, of course keeping them secret from the thief. And then he'll choose one of those cards to be his secret identity. So one of these characters he'll choose from among the suspects to be his secret identity. Now, he knows that the thief, because the thief took the first turn, is adjacent to this card, but that could be any number of cards still, so he doesn't know. So anyway, he's going to choose one of these to be his secret identity. And we'll just say he secretly chooses Laney to be his secret identity, which Laney is currently right here. So he'll take that card, flip it over, put that in his play area. The other 3 cards he'll keep in his hand. And of course he knows that none of these cards, not his character they chose, or these, are the thief, so those are evidence for him, and he'll keep those secret, and he can use those for one of his possible actions, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But that's all that the detective does on his first turn of the game. Alright, so after the detective has finished their first turn of the game, which basically is just choosing their identity, then the thief will take their next turn, and now they can do any of their possible actions. So let's talk about all of the thief's possible actions. So one action that we've already talked about is steal, where he can flip over a card that is adjacent to the thief's current identity, can flip out over any suspect that is adjacent to him to the robbed side. Of course, that's if the character he flips is the detective, then he wins the game. And also I mentioned if the thief manages to rob 25 different suspects, then that is another way that he wins the game. So that's the steal action. There is a little bit more to the steal action, but we'll come back to that. Let's move on to the shift action. The shift action, both the thief and the detective can do the shift action. So with the shift action, you can either shift a row or column left or right, or up or down by just like if you're going to shift this row to the right, you would remove Tom and scoot all the cards down one and then place Tom on the opposite side. If you were going to shift this column here up, you would remove Scott K, shift all the cards up one row and then place Scott K at the bottom. If you were going to shift this row left, you would remove Jeremy, scoot all the cards over one row and place Jeremy on the right. So I think you get the idea. So you can shift either a column or a row, left or right or up or down, and both players have that as one of their possible actions. The third and final possible action for the thief is disguise. When they disguise, they draw a top card from the evidence deck, look at it. If that suspect has not already been robbed, which in this case he is, if it was a card that had not already been robbed, then they would replace their current character with this character. So let me just grab one that hasn't been robbed. So let's say they drew Carol. So they would replace their currently identity with Carol. They keep that secret from the detective player. And then they would take their previous character and clear them by placing the card on top of the cleared card on top of their suspect card. So in that way, if they thought the detective was honing in on their location, they disguise themselves by drawing a new character from the evidence deck, becoming that character, and exonerating their old character by placing the card that was them on the cleared side up on top of that suspect card. Now, if like we've shown, the card you draw, if you're doing the disguise, is a suspect that's already been robbed, like we drew Emil and he's already been robbed. If that's the case, then the card you drew does not become your new identity. You just discard that card next to the play area face up, and you do not get a new identity from that disguise action that turn. Alright, so those are the 3 actions the thief can do. So again, he's really trying to steal from adjacent suspects, hoping to either find the detective to immediately win that way, or by robbing 16 different suspects and winning that way. One other thing about the steal action, whenever all cards in a row or a column have been robbed, then you would remove all the cards from that row and then just shrink the play area down. And same with a column. If all the cards in a column had been robbed, you would just remove those cards and have a smaller play area at that point. Again, those robbed cards will still count as being robbed towards the thief's total of 16. Alright, the actions the detective can take on their turn. We've talked about shift already. Both the thief and the detective can take that action. The detective can also take the investigate action. So when you take the investigate action, you can choose any of the suspects that are adjacent to the character you are. So right now the detective is Lainey. So Lainey could choose any of the suspects, including herself, just to throw off the thief. Any of the suspects adjacent to her or her, and ask the thief if that is them. If they correctly identify the thief, then if the thief says yes, then the detective immediately wins the game. If not, well, then the detective just knows that person is not the thief. Alright, another possible action that the detective can take is the exonerate action. When they take that, they'll draw a card from the evidence deck, add that to the hand of 3 cards they already had in their hand, and then they choose one of those cards. Then they'll choose one of those cards from their hand and discard it, or discard it if that character that they're choosing has already been robbed. If it's not a character that's already been robbed, then they exonerate that character by placing the cleared card on top of them. But in either case, the thief must say if their character, the character that they are, is adjacent to the suspect that was just exonerated. So if he chose Daniel here and exonerated him, then our thief would have to say whether they were one of these, well, we know it wouldn't be this one or this one, but it would have to say whether they were one of these adjacent. Now, they don't have to say which one they are, they just have to say if they're adjacent. We know currently our thief is Carol because that's the card they chose when they did the disguise. So they would say no. And then the detective would still have his hand of 3 cards that he also knows are not the thief. And he knows the thief is not adjacent to that person he just cleared. And those are pretty much the rules of the game. The players will just take turns taking an action, until either the detective finds the thief with an investigate, or the thief does a steal and ends up stealing from the detective's character, or manages to rob 16 different characters before they are found. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention about the steal. If the thief does a steal action against a character that was previously exonerated or cleared in any manner, either from the thief doing a disguise and replacing his identity with the cleared card, or from the detective doing an exonerate action where they placed a cleared card on top of a suspect. If the thief robs a suspect that has previously been cleared, they just go ahead and take that cleared card off and flip them to the robbed side. This card can just be discarded. But the detective then has to announce if he is adjacent to, if his character is adjacent to the character that you just stole from that had previously been cleared. So that's one kind of negative aspect of the detective doing exonerate actions. He's placing those cleared cards on suspects, but if later the thief robs from one of those cleared suspects, the detective has to say if his current location is adjacent to that suspect that was just robbed that had previously been cleared. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, that's it. It's a pretty quick game. I'm going to set it back up and we'll go through a few example turns. Alright, let's go through some example turns. I've set everything back up, kind of reshuffled this a little bit. So the first turn of the game is the thief. That's when on his first turn he'll draw a card and determine his identity, so we know he is Tom, so he'll keep that secret, place that right there. And then he has to do a steal on his first turn. That's the only action he can do. Tom is over here, so he's got to steal from somebody adjacent. And we'll have him steal, or rob, I guess. But it's a steal action, so Carol. Alright, that's his turn. Now the first turn for the detective. He's got to draw 4 identity cards. Choose one to be his identity. We'll have him choose Eric, so he'll keep that in his play area face down, and the other cards will be his hand of cards, and that's all he can do on his first turn of the game. And he would keep these secret. I'm going to keep them face up, but he would keep those secret from the thief. And now we go back to the thief's turn. The thief can now do any of his actions, either shift, steal, or disguise. I think he's going to steal again. Let's say he's going to steal from Nikki. So he'll rob Nikki. If that was the detective would have to say, yes, that's me and you've won, but we know it's not because the detective is Eric. Alright, it's the detective's turn. They can do either shift, investigate, or exonerate. They know that the thief has to be adjacent to these 2 cards. So that maybe he's Scott A. or Bradley. Could be Tom or Frazier. So it's got to be, they know it's got to be one of those. So they're going to investigate. And remember, when you investigate, you choose one of the suspects adjacent to your identity. The thief has to answer yes if it's them, and if it is, they win. So Eric is going to investigate Frazier, thinking maybe that's who it is. So they point to Frazier, saying they're investigating Frazier. The thief says, no, that is not me. So that gives the detective a little bit of information. He now knows that the thief has got to be either Scott A. or Bradley or Tom. But it also gives the thief some information because they know that the person he investigates has to be adjacent to him, and they know it's not Carol, so they know. Now that doesn't eliminate Fraser because you can investigate yourself, but they know it's probably one of these, either Fraser or Jeff or Eric. So both of them have kind of been narrowed down already. But the thief's kind of getting worried that he's given away too much to where he's at, so he's going to do a disguise. So he'll draw the top card of the evidence deck. That will be who he is now. So he's Jeff, and he will take his old identity and now place that card on them, clearing Tom. So the thief is now Jeff, which that is dangerously close to Eric. But the detective does not know that the thief is Jeff now. So anyway, it's his turn now, so he can do a shift, an investigate, or exonerate. Now, if he did an investigate and investigated Jeff right now, he would win the game. But he probably wouldn't have any idea that the thief is now right next to him. So I'm not going to do that. We'll have him do an exonerate just to show that. So he would draw the top card from the evidence deck, add that to his hand, and then he's going to choose one of those and exonerate. So we'll say he chooses Daniel, so he places that on Daniel, clears Daniel. But now, if the thief is adjacent to Daniel, he has to say that he's adjacent. But he's not, because we know he's Jeff, so he just says no. And now we're back to the thief's turn, so he can do a shift, steal, or disguise again. The thief, he's kind of certain that probably the detective is one of these two, but he thinks maybe the detective was trying to throw the thief off track when he pointed to Fraser. So he decides he's going to rob Fraser, hoping that's the detective. So he robs Fraser. Unfortunately, that's not the detective, so the detective has to say, "Hey, that's me." So he doesn't win. But now that was a very bad move by the thief. He was taking a chance, hoping he was going to get the detective. But now the detective knows he can only steal from somebody that's adjacent to him. Well, he knows it's not any of these because he's been cleared. These two have already been robbed. He knows it's not himself. So now he knows where Jeff is. So he's going to investigate. He's going to point to Jeff, and Jeff have to say, "Yes, that's me," and reveal himself. And the detective wins the game. But I didn't show an example of a shift, but let's just say instead of investigating or stealing from Fraser, the thief decided he wanted to shift because he's worried the detective might know where he is. So maybe he wants to shift right. So he's going to shift this row right. So Eric would get shifted over there. Both these Daniel cards shifted over there. Dale over here. And then Jeff would be way over here, far from Eric, so he wouldn't get to investigate him. So that's one thing we didn't see, but the way it was, the thief made a foolish mistake, and the detective capitalized on it and found him. But I think we showed most of the rules in that sample game. Let me see if there's anything I missed. Well, we didn't show stealing from a suspect that had previously been exonerated, But I mentioned in the rules overview, if you do that, if you steal from a suspect that's previously been exonerated, you remove that card, flip them over to robbed, and then if the detective is adjacent to that suspect that you just robbed, then he has to say, yes, I'm adjacent to that card. But anyway, you can see it's a pretty quick game. I mean, that example went by quicker than normal, probably, but it's not very long. It's, probably a 10, 15, 15-minute game at most anyway. But anyway, just thought I would show that one as I just come across it, forgot I even had it, and thought it would make a quick video. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.